Your stories don't define you. How you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker of Elkins Consulting. Many of my clients reach out to me because they're in transition. Their children are hitting milestone ages. They want more from their work. They're hitting a big number birthday. And they want to develop clarity about their natural strengths, what their next adventure might look like. In this series, you'll hear me ask my guests questions to dig deeply into the stories that shaped their lives, stories that uncover patterns and may unveil insights into dissatisfaction, and also where their strengths lie and where they found and continue to find joy. This podcast's intention is to have listeners think of their own related stories and how they tell them, discovering the internal messages that are limiting their success, and discovering how to shift their stories so they become positive life lessons to move them forward. If you're curious about what it would be like to work with me, visit elkinsconsulting.com and schedule a one-time 90-minute StrengthsFinder session. Yet another fantastic LinkedIn introduction for me. Today, I have Daniel Felt on the Your Stories Don't Define You podcast, and I'm so eager to hear his stories about the business that he recently started and how it's going and why it mattered to him to start this. So Daniel, thank you so much for coming and spending some time with me on my show.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, I always start with a question to put your stories into context, a larger view of who you are, because I feel like a lot of times when we dive right into conversation, people don't really know who you are in a way that they can see the complexity of our humanity. So I'm assuming you have something to share about yourself that most people might not know about you.
Yeah, I would say it might seem like a sad start, but it's actually a positive. I come from a very large family. I'm one of 6 kids, but I had an older brother that was born before me who sadly passed away in a car accident when he was 18 years old. And most people don't know this, but when I was born years later, I was like a Band-Aid or healing for my family from that tragedy. And from the way I was raised, and I feel like I was hugged extra and loved extra. I think it really gave me a lot of confidence to get me where I'm at today. And just a very interesting upbringing. My parents, I was born in the 80s. So when I was born, we got a video camera to capture all the stuff. There's just a lot of things that I feel like I'll say humbly, I think I was spoiled extra. And but I think it really helped define who I am today.
Oh, wow. Daniel, thank you for sharing that. I just got a little chill up my spine thinking about, I wouldn't call it a Band-Aid. I would call it evidence of life.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I had this discussion with Stephen Megling on my podcast a few years back. He was one of my early interviews, and he was talking about how frustrated he used to get when he'd get home and his wife would have left crumbs on the counter and the coffee cups out and dishes in the dishwasher. It would just drive him crazy. But after she was diagnosed with breast cancer and in the middle of treatment, and he'd come home and the house was clean because she would be at the hospital or, whatever. He said he actually appreciated coming home to crumbs on the counter after a while as evidence that she was a survivor. And I think about that with my kids too, now that they're out of the house. I don't really miss picking up dirty socks from wedged in the couch cushions, but it was evidence, of their being there, of being part of that family and the environment. So
sure.
I love that you just shared that story. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
So extra loved. So you're the youngest of 6.
No, so I'm right in the middle. It's 2 girls, 2 boys, and there's 2 more girls below us. So my brother and I are smack dab right in the middle of all the ladies in our family.
Wow, but you were the first that was born after the death of the oldest.
Yes, yep, correct.
Oh, wow. That totally puts a completely different spin on what I was imagining.
Yeah, and it's so interesting looking at family dynamics because almost all of my siblings are 2 years apart, except for my brother and I, there's a 4.5-year gap. And so there's tendencies that I have that I'm willing to be part of the group and follow along and not be a leader. But then because my older brother was gone for 4.5 years while I was there, I also have a lot of tendencies that usually an older sibling has. So it's a really interesting mix, because sometimes when people meet me, and some people are really dive deep into, like, they think your birth order defines extremely who you are. They can't quite figure it out. And I think that's why, is because of that age gap and being part of a large family. I have some very strong leadership tendencies where I can't turn off, but I also am willing to follow directions and be part of a team as well.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, they do say that if it's more than 5 years, which 4.5 was pretty close, that you do tend to act like an only child for a little while.
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting. Until the next one is born, of course.
Yeah.
Wow. So that totally makes sense for your formative years, 2 years before your next sibling was born, your younger brother.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that, I do think that there is something to be said about birth order, because there's so many similarities. And I love to look at it in juxtaposition to StrengthsFinder results.
Yes.
So I put them next to each other, and I can definitely see some interesting patterns there in how those strengths show up among middle children versus firstborn youngest. Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. So tell me, well, first of all, why don't you introduce your company? Tell our listeners what it is that Kura Home does.
Yeah, so we offer two services. The one is really simple. It's one-time air duct cleaning, very simple business that I'm sure there's air duct cleaning in everyone's neighborhood. But the really cool part of our business is our routine maintenance subscription. And what we do, we visit our clients' homes. It's typically once every 3 months or once a season. And we offer about 35 services, doing everything you're supposed to be doing as a perfect homeowner, but no one does to follow manufacturer's recommendations. So from providing and changing all your filters, cleaning your dryer vent, AC unit, we even change smoke alarm batteries for people. So it's like a janitor coming into your home, and we just take care of all the annoying routine maintenance tasks that people neglect.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that when I looked at the website. That didn't occur to me. So it started basically as air duct cleaning.
Actually, switch it. We started as routine maintenance, and we actually started off as monthly visits, but only 11 people signed on in the first 6 months, and that was not going to pay the bills. And so, fortunately, talked to a lot of people and asked a lot of questions, and it was recommended to me to switch to quarterly. And so we just changed that one word in our marketing, and a ton of people signed on then from that. But because we offer air duct cleaning, because we offer dryer vent cleaning as one of those services, people associate dryer vent cleaning with air duct cleaning. And so we added air duct cleaning. And what's really crazy is that today, 6 years later, air duct cleaning is roughly 50% of our business.
Wow. Well, that makes sense to me, because that's the stuff that every fall, when the boiler comes on or the heat comes on and it pushes that dusty air through your vents.
Yes.
I know. We have a house built in 1890 and forced air heat from the basement. And man, is that dusty. And then we turn on the air in the summer because it brings the cool air from the basement up into our 1890s brick home. But every time that comes on after having been turned off, I wish that I had them cleaned out, which I don't think we've ever done it in the 20 years in our house.
Yeah, we get a lot of really good stuff out of your house. Any house that's been, like, we always say, like, something new, right? Like a new home, new baby, new furnace, new construction project. That's what people are talking about all the time when they call us. But if it's been more than like 4 or 5 years, we'll get a lot of really good stuff out of your air ducts for sure.
Oh, I'm sure. Do you also do chimney cleaning? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, no, we do not at this time. I've thought about it many times, but I'm not willing to do it myself. It's such a dirty job that I haven't asked my team members to do it. But no, we haven't. It's not as common in the Minneapolis area. Chimney cleaning is not as sought out as some of the other services.
Right, which totally makes sense. No, actually, it doesn't make sense, because you would think in a cold environment like that, people would be using their fireplaces. But that's beside the point. Let's talk stories. Now that I understand your business, because I was curious about that, and I didn't feel like I could ask the appropriate and insightful questions without knowing a little bit more. You were at a different company that did similar things before, and what was that?
Yep, it's actually my brother's company, and I will start with an asterisk and say that we are still very, very good friends. And,
good.
And the Christmas dinner is very peaceful, so he's one of my closest friends. But he also offers home services. However, the difference is that he does window cleaning and holiday lights. So we don't offer the same services, but we are in the same genre of business of servicing our clients.
Oh, okay. So you worked for him and you noticed there was a need for
Yeah,
different kinds of services. Tell me about that.
for sure. He runs a very successful company. And with that, window cleaning and holiday lights, you're typically in a higher end home. So I was a general manager of his company. And just in having conversations with his clients, there was definitely a typical conversation along the lines of like, who do you recommend for this or who can do that? And I actually remember one homeowner saying it was very specific. I just wish I could find someone to pay to do this. That was a very common.
Hello.
Yeah, exactly. So we were talking, and he actually, my brother had partnered with someone who was doing property management. So it was quite costly, but they would just completely manage your home, and their target market was like professional athletes. You for sure had to be very, very, very. You're like the 1% of the 1%, very high end. And I recommended to them, why don't we get rid of all that fluff that barely anyone wants, and we do something that every single home in the Twin Cities market needs. And they thought it would not be a good idea. It would not fit in. And I came back a month later and I actually had a business plan written up. I'm like, you guys, look, this is going to be awesome. And this is what everyone needs. I've talked to a bunch of people and they're like, nope, that will not work. We are not doing that. And I just couldn't drop it. It's just kind of stayed in the back of my mind for a very long time and for months. And so in that late spring, told my brother that, hey, I gotta go out. I gotta start this myself. I gotta take the risk. And I gave him, several months notice, and I left a few months later.
Wow. Your entrepreneurial mind was like, somebody just said they want to pay somebody to do this.
Yes.
What piece are we missing here?
Yeah. Yeah. When people like pull out their paycheck or their checkbook, excuse me, and they're like, hey, like, can someone just do this for me? Right. Like there's definitely a
Right.
need for that. So it's the difficult part is educating people on what we do. We're a very niche business and
Mhm.
barely anyone Googles. There's roughly 4 million people in Minneapolis and there's less than 20 searches a month on Google for routine home maintenance. So it's very tricky to educate your clientele on the service exists.
That is so interesting. I love this moment in your aha. Like somebody just took out a checkbook and asked to pay for the service that is a service that everybody needs at some point in their
Yeah.
home ownership and probably more regularly than they know. And they don't notice until they notice that there's a problem.
Right.
But it's just like having your lawn aerated or the typical stuff that you don't really want to pay anybody to do, but you can do it anyway. What gave you the idea? What was the moment where you're like, oh, these people also need their the other home maintenance other than air duct cleaning? Or did it start as the full thing?
Yeah, so it started for us as just a routine maintenance service, and then as people were actually asking to have their air ducts cleaned as well, and I didn't do it. My initial thought process was, well, air duct cleaning, it seemed like actually a sketchy industry, and I think most people, if you think of it, you hear about the bait and switch, and you've seen like the 60 minutes documents on it, right? Unfortunately, in every industry, there are people that go out and maybe it's low price in, high price out, or a bait and switch of some sort. So I found a gentleman that I was referring, and at this point in my business, there was a week in the middle of 2017 where I referred 5 jobs to him in 1 week, and I was running the numbers, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm referring more work to him than I'm actually doing myself. This is we're starting up, so I'm like, I gotta look into this, and so I did a bunch of research. I bought an air duct cleaning machine, and it was a complete piece of junk. It did not do a good job. And so for me, growing up on a farm and just being, that there's always a better way to do something, I did a bunch of research and now we buy equipment from about 11 different manufacturers to get the equipment that we need to clean air ducts properly.
So you basically create a Frankenstein air duct cleaner.
Exactly. That's exactly what we did. Yep.
To make sure that you're doing it right and well and effectively.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Wow, that's so cool. Wait, I'm just so curious about. Obviously, I'm figuring out a little bit about how your brain works. Jumping from one thing to the next. I'm kind of going through my head about what your strengths are in StrengthsFinder because that's like my go-to. Like, okay, clearly he has this and this, and Achiever is way up there. Have you always been the kind of person that when you see a problem that needs to be solved, you start by diving in with research and then you come up with a plan?
Yeah, most definitely. I think my mindset on it is that the more you research, right, the more confident you are on this problem. And I think, some people will say, oh, that was like such a huge risk for you, Daniel. And like, I can't believe you did that. And like when you really get into the details, yeah, you dive super deep. I was set up for, I feel like I couldn't fail. I was renting out my basement that covered 2/3 of my mortgage. I was boarding and training dogs on the side, arguably passive income. And between those two, all things were taken care of. Like I could have lived off of just that, and Kura Home could have, broke even for years. And because at the time, right, you're Bachelor, you can live off of ramen noodles for quite a while.
Oh,
And
I did that.
yeah, so I had all these things set up so that I could succeed. And I also took a reverse equity line out against my house before I started the company. So I had all these things. I had a base that, hey, you can go out and do this. And my thought was I can always go back to, I could always apply. Like, I hope that my brother would have been willing to take me back. Right? So I had all these things that you do a ton of research, you find out like how much money does it take to start a business, right? I financed the vehicle, I took that reverse equity line out against my house, and I felt ready to do it. I didn't just, be like, hey, I didn't just walk in and quit my job and be like, okay, now what do I do? I always do a ton of research, and doing all that research allows you to confidently make decisions based on education.
That's really interesting. It's kind of the opposite of how I do things. So you may think that this is, I'm not kidding. My husband would agree. But I think you're underestimating how you made this happen. I mean, in some ways you totally get it, but in other ways you're like, well, wouldn't everybody do this? Doesn't everybody do things this way? And I'm here to tell you, no, they don't. And it's not, there's no judgment here either way. I know that what I've done has been pretty successful so far. And I didn't just dive in without having evidence that people would pay me to do what I do.
Right.
At the same time, I did not do what you have done. And it's just so impressive from the outside looking in.
Thank you.
And your brother, did he start the other company? Or was it a franchise from something else?
He started his old company. He started his as well. So definitely a family of entrepreneurs.
And is he your other middle brother?
Yeah, he's my older brother.
Right. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. So you have the 2 boys and 4 girls.
Just us 2 boys, and then we have 4 sisters.
Okay. I was trying to imagine, I was thinking the 2 youngest were girls, 2 middle were boys, but that's not right. Okay. Yeah. I have to have a visual.
Yeah. If you, my family, you almost have to draw a tree to like really get it. So we'd have to have a whiteboard conversation to really understand how dynamic it is. And Christmas is just crazy at our house. So it's if you don't quite get it without a whiteboard, I completely understand.
Well, my husband is the oldest of 5, and his dad was the middle of 8. So wow. Yeah, really big families. And I'm the middle of 3. So it's not like it was a super small family either. But right. Yeah, the dynamics really shifted when you described the death of your oldest brother, and then when you came along and then having more siblings after that. So yeah. And I do think it's important to get this context, to have this image of where you are in the family and your siblings, because they do create your identity. Mm-hmm. For better or for worse. And the stories that they tell about us in front of us contribute to our identity.
For sure.
So this all, for better and for worse, one way or another. So Kura, what is that? Is that a name you came up with? How?
Yeah. I kind of invented it. I'll say I was searching for words, a name for this company. I thought Daniel's Home Maintenance did not define what we wanted to be. My last name is Felt, and Felt's Home Maintenance really sounded kind of weird. And so I was searching for words that actually meant to care for, right? Our goal is to come in and take care of your home. So what defines that? And I actually found a word called Kura. If you spell it Cura, and that, if you translate in Italian, that means to care for. Well, the problem is there's a lot of companies who found that before I did. So I didn't want people to be confused. If you're, searching on Google, or if you, kind of like, I think like that happens a lot of times with like roofing or plumbing companies, right? It's like it can be difficult to differentiate each other. And so I thought, could I spell it with a K, Kura? And I looked, and Kura LLC was available. KuraHome.com was available, and very symmetrical. I really loved how symmetrical KuraHome.com was. And so I decided to go with that. And I think what I really like is that people ask, what does it mean? And it means that we're going to take care of your home for you. And that's what we do.
Huh. What was the moment? I mean, when you're kind of looking at it, was it when you got a logo? Was it when you talked to somebody? What was the moment where you're like, yep, this is it. This is going to work?
Yeah, I was talking to my buddy, and I found another word from another language that meant to care for, but no one could pronounce it. He's like, and my friend, and I'm very lucky to be friends with him. He's literally a rocket scientist. He's an aerospace engineer, super smart guy. And he's like, Dan, if I don't know, Daniel, I don't know what that means. No one knows, right? So I'm like, you're right. And he had, humble brag there that he's super smart. So I remember saying, this is going to work. So we started out with the name Kura Home. And then we did the logo afterwards. And the logo, my buddy who had a little bit of graphic design, we were sitting at my kitchen table, and we made it work.
So what do you think was the moment like after? I'm sure there's a situation either with a client or with a new employee that you realized that you were on the right track and it just was right.
Yeah, I remember a very, very specific, it was the first client that we signed on who did not know me. They didn't know who I was.
Stranger.
Yep, a complete stranger. And I came in, came to their house, gave them an estimate, and said, here's what your price will be. We'll maintain your home for this price. And they signed on. And I remember I'm super close to my mom still, even all these years later.
Good.
Very regularly. And I remember calling her, and I said, Mom, this is it. Like, well, I'm gonna make it. Like,
I'm made for this.
Yep. This is fun. And I remember getting like a little high from that, like an endorphin rush. Like, I'm like, this is it. And that felt really awesome, that a complete stranger, I came, you were introduced to me from, word of mouth, and they signed on without knowing me or my background. That was a really, really rewarding feeling from there. That was awesome.
Wow. It just occurred to me that the reason that felt so right to you, the reason it was such an inspiring moment to you and you got that chill up your spine, it's because they trusted you, that you were able to establish trust so quickly and so thoroughly that they were ready not only to have you in their home, but to have you in your home regularly and to pay you for that.
Yes, most definitely.
So you probably have, I'm just going to throw this out there, you probably have responsibility somewhere in your top 10, if not in your top 5 strengths, because to be trusted is really critical to people with that in their top talents. And to establish it that quickly, that's part of your identity. I'm a responsible person, and they could see that in me. They knew it when they met me.
For sure. It's very, very important to me. It's like, little things that like show that, like the little things that build that foundation of trustworthiness, right? Like the showing up on time and all those little things that they really build up are very, very important to me.
So you must instill that in your employees. How many employees do you have now?
Right now we have about 20 employees, and we're located in Minneapolis and Denver as well. So my employees, we actually, they sign a code of conduct, and one of the items on there says that we will always do what we say we'll always do what we say we're going to do. We will never check a box or task that wasn't actually completed, and we will not take any shortcuts, no matter the time of the day or stress of the job. So they are agreeing that, hey, like we're gonna give people 100% no matter what. And one thing that I really try to instill with our team members here is that when you're at a client's home, I think it can be really easy to kind of like, be like, oh, it's just a job, right? But to kind of put a person behind that. And I say, we always want to treat a customer as if it was our sister, our mom, or our grandma. And how would you want your grandma to be treated if you knew that she was getting this service done at her home? And if you treat that customer that day that way, you're going to be just fine.
That's great. I think about that a lot in my own actions. I think, well, if if my kids saw me do this,
Mm-hmm.
if my sister heard those words coming out of my mouth, would that be okay with me?
Right.
And it definitely, there are moments where I stop myself, like, oh, that's not in alignment with how I want to live my life and be perceived by others.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, that personal brand thing is really important when you're representing yourself and your company.
Yep.
So what made you decide to open in Denver?
Yeah, we were growing quickly. And at the time, I thought that the owner operator locations would be, or, corporate owned would be best. And I've now found out that franchising is a better route for us. But just to copy and paste, my brother had opened up a window cleaning location in Denver, and that was going well. And Denver has very similar demographics and a very fast growing population compared to Minneapolis. So similar demographics, but a faster growing population, and easy to get to. If I had to get there, flights between Minneapolis and Denver, even though I've only gone there once since we opened it. But, thankful for technology, right, to be able to. But we decided to open that just for those reasons, and it's been going well. It's not growing as quickly as Minneapolis did, but I think it's no matter how hard you try, when you're the owner, you're always going to care the most, hopefully.
Of course.
Yeah, and so when I'm not there, boots on the ground, I think it's a little different, but it is still growing, and it's a very successful location for us.
That's so cool. I have to ask, did you co-locate your office?
No, we did not. We're just in Plymouth, so we answer the phones here on the West Metro of Minneapolis.
Oh.
So we answer the phones here and we dispatch it to our team member there. We only have one guy there right now, and he works out of his home, so he keeps the vehicle at his home, and he goes out and does his jobs for the day. And it's almost like, what's very interesting is he could be on the West Metro or East Metro of Minneapolis, or in Colorado or California, wherever. It doesn't really matter, because it's so simple with technology to do that. But it's unfortunate that but it's good. There's so much power in face-to-face, communication and that trust that you talk about, that when you're so far away, it's hard to build that with your client base. But it can be done. It just takes a little longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can highly recommend a visit to Denver. It's a beautiful city. And I've had one of my conferences there, my no longer virtual conference, and it's more of a summit as opposed to a conference. Yeah. And my brother lives there, and I actually went to school in Fort Collins, just north of Denver. And I went to high school just south of Denver in Colorado Springs. So I would highly recommend going and just spending like a month there, just exploring. Yes,
it is beautiful. I don't know how many times I've been there throughout my personal life. Like, I'm very adventurous, so skiing and doing all the things. We spent a week camping there with my entire family. So I've been there many times, but for work, it's only been once, which has been very surprising.
Maybe it's time. Wow, that's so great. So I kind of want to bring this full circle about why you believe that getting the extra love made you successful, and how are you paying that forward? What are you doing? I am getting the impression that you're not married and have kids yet. So, but I could be totally wrong. I could have totally missed that too. So what are you doing as a leader that is paying that forward?
Yeah, for sure. I think to answer your first part of the question, what it's done for me is I think that as you grow up and you get to know other people, and I think it's very rare for someone to grow up in a home that they feel very confident. They were told they were loved every single day. They were, motivated, encouraged, whether that be T-ball or whatever it be. I was always really encouraged and motivated to do those things, but I was also disciplined at the same time. I didn't just get away with anything. My dad really, I remember having to run outside. I was about 8 years old, and we had to clock in. He had an old timesheet. It put an actual ink stamp on the time card that you had to punch in. And I remember you had to clock in by 8 a.m. That was required. So I remember, sprinting out there one summer morning, but it wasn't as bad as it sounded. We had afternoons off, but during the cool of the day, we worked from about 8 to noon every day until my dad came.
You're on a farm.
Yep, exactly. So that was really great. So, but I was that background and all those things, gave me the confidence to be where I got to the point where, hey, I'm ready to start my own company. And, earlier, Sarah said, you might not realize how rare it is. It's so interesting in having conversations with team members and employees that you realize, like, barely anyone thinks the way I do. And, everyone thinks, well, I'm normal, everyone else is abnormal, right? But I think I do realize that I'm kind of crazy. I'm definitely abnormal, but I do have a family. I know I haven't brought it up yet. I do have a wife, and my son is almost 2, and we have one on the way due in August. And
Yay.
yeah, it's super fun. It's one of the most rewarding things for me. And one thing that I put in place as soon as I was married is that I don't miss dinner with my family. And bringing that into place of growing up, when you walk in the door, right, and your son comes running up and you're part of his life and doing all those things together, I just think it's super important to be there, be present, right? Like, work is always going to be there. You can always answer an email later on. Like, people, it's fine. Like, you can take a break, and once he goes to bed, do I jump on and answer emails every once in a while at 8:30, 9 o'clock? Sure, but it can always wait. So that ground rule for me, being home for dinner, that's one thing that is very important to me, to be very present in my family and be there to do your part.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever noticed that some clients get frustrated with that, or other clients are like, well, yeah, of course, that's how life should be?
Yeah, I have never had a single person be frustrated with me that I was not able to make it or be at a spot, right? Because everything in our business, we're not a 911 call. We're not an emergency. Like, if your furnace goes
Right.
out, it's
They're not calling you.
Yeah, you don't
Right.
call us. Right? So there have been times. I remember one time we drained water heater sediment for someone, and they sent me a text at like 8:30 at night, and they're like, we don't have hot water. And I got in my truck and I went to their house. It was like, I got there at like 9 o'clock, and we figured it out. We fixed it, and it wasn't even because of what we did. It just happened to be that we were there that same day, and the stars aligned. But so there are times where I have to go, but I never just casually work late. Like, I don't just like, oh, I have stuff to do at the office. Like, when I'm here, I get my stuff done, and that way when I'm at home, I can be very present. So I don't think I've ever lost out on a deal or lost a client or anything like that because I was having dinner with my family. And at the end of the day, if they don't share the same core values, there's so many millions of people in this world, and billions. Like, there's someone else that you could work with.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I've had a coaching client be very demanding, and there was a point where I just had to fire him. Yes. I was like, I can't keep taking your calls like this. It's disrupting my household and my life. And you don't seem to have any understanding of boundaries. And, well, I'm paying you, but you have to choose. You have to choose. And if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. So That's where I was going with that. I appreciate that. And then the last part of that question about leadership is, how do you think that's translated? Because you're not two separate people at work and at home. You're still the same guy at work. So how does that love translate at work? How do you demonstrate that?
Yeah, I think it's trying to really build up people to make, help it be that Kura Home is a step up or a stepping stone to somewhere new. And I hate that I love this story, but we hired a gentleman. This was years ago, and he started out like mid-teens as a technician. This was 5-6 years ago, and worked his way up until he was salaried, a company car. And this guy, no college degree or anything, he had a great job. And then he got offered a even better job. Like, it was a job that was like, that is awesome. I'm not even going to insult you with a counter offer because it was such a great, like, had all the things, like an insane 401k match. And we went out for lunch on one of his last days. And we were talking, and he said, hey, I just want to say thank you. And I was like, for what? And he was like, when I started working here, I had no idea that I could become what I am. And he was an operations manager for me. He's like, I learned what customer service is. I now understand what consistency is. I understand all these things in the workplace. And he's at a spot as a very young man. I think he's like 25, and he's making just a really incredible living at this new spot that where he was when he came in to where he is today is just super rewarding. So bringing people, by your side and walking together and continuously training. We have a 45-day training program that is just on repeat. Every morning, our technicians come at 7:20, and we have a 10 to 15 minute huddle, and we automatically cover at least one training subject. But then if there's any like a callback or a customer issue at any point, we cover that so it can stop happening immediately, and just continuously to build the character and the skills of the people around you, I think is really important. And I think too, another thing that's really important is when you're learning things is to be a mentor. I mentor two people that are younger than I am. We meet once a month and talk about whatever they need to talk about to grow as professionals. And that is extremely rewarding, just to see people grow and become better versions of themselves.
I love it. That's a perfect answer, because I can tell you that is a direct application and implication for what you said about how you were raised, and being people were so devoted to your happiness and your love and your success. And when you shower that on your employees, they know it, they see it, they feel it, because you're welcoming their whole being and not just the part that goes to work.
Yeah.
And I have to put in a little plug for my friend Ahad Gadimi's book. It's called The Turnaround Artist. And it's about a restaurant that he turned around. It happened to be his father's restaurant. Wow. And if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. The Turnaround Artist by Ahad Gadimi. And I can't remember which episode I interviewed him on my podcast, but it has a similar feel in that idea of recognizing individuals for who they are and what their potential is, and then allowing them and encouraging them to explore that potential.
Awesome. I'll have to check it out. Sure.
Yeah, Daniel, this has been such a pleasure. I'm so glad that your employee reached out to me and said, you should interview my boss. He's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
That was great. And if our listeners want to get a hold of you or be in touch with you, are you on LinkedIn? What's the best way to do that?
Yes, super active on LinkedIn. It is Daniel Felt, or follow us on social media. It's at Kura Home on all the things. We're even on TikTok. So we're doing all the things. If you're interested in being part of Kura Home or owning a Kura Home franchise, we'd love to have a conversation with you.
Kura with a K, not with a C, because Kura with a C is the Italian word for care for.
That's right.
I'm never going to forget that. I love it. Daniel, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.